free to raise your hand with any questions or any needed clarification. So I'm gonna go here to my terminal. Now I'm gonna go to maybe cd core unit 5. Here I'm gonna create a folder. Actually, the Express generator will create the folder for me. How do we run the Express generator? Yes.
npx express dash generator space dash dash no dash u.
Yep.
Then the file name.
Then yeah, whatever we want to call it. So I'm gonna call this one backend off. This new view you can do without it. No view save us from some files that we're never gonna use. So let's run that. Cool. So Express generators tell us everything that it did. It created these files, tell us how to change the directories, how to install the dependencies, and so on. So I'm going to open this with code. Oops, I meant only the app. So I'm going to do code backend off to open only that folder. And we have our app. Now from here, what are sort of some key files or stuff we look at and why? Do this.
The top level app.js.
Yes, this is an app file we will be touching. Is this enough zoom in the back? Cool. Cool. So, as always, Express generator sort of gives a scaffolding for an Express app, similar to the Create React app, but for Express, right? And let's install the dependencies of this. I'm gonna exit this terminal and open the integrated one in VS Code. Do that with Control backtick to open the terminal here, or just hit this terminal window option. Let's do P. And then here, since I'm in that folder, I'm gonna do npm install. This will install all the dependencies. Yes, Owen. Dash no dash view space the name of the file, the name of the folder that I want to create. I can show it again here. This one. No, we don't need to do Create React App. We're not going to talk about Create React App or any React related stuff today. We're going to do that tomorrow. Yeah. For now, we just need to create a backend with the Express generator. Cool. Now let's look at the dependencies that the Express generator sort of gives us, which is just cookie parser, debug, Express, and Morgan. From here, what are other packages that we're going to need or that are convenient? Dinesh? Nodemon. Nodemon is great, so let's install that. Now, since Nodemon is a module that it's for development, right? It's not, our application will not depend directly on Nodemon. Nodemon is just a nice tool to have for developing Express apps. So when you change something and save, it reloads for you. That's a really good developer experience that we can have with Nodemon. So I'm going to do npm install -d for a development dependency, Nodemon. And what that does is it's gonna it creates a new key here, dev dependencies that we see, and it puts nodemon there. This is because nodemon, our code is not gonna break if there is no nodemon, right? Now from here, what I like to do is then I like to leave this one as it is, start, and I add another key here, start dev, where I type in nodemon bin www, and I'm missing. You could also change it here, but I prefer a separate one. And then the way in which I will run my app is I'll do npm run start dev. When you do npm start, what happens is this start script is running, meaning this is executing. So if I run npm start, my app will run with Node. If I run npm run start dev, my app will run with nodemon. And I like this separate one just because once we start to deploy these applications to Heroku, Heroku is not going to install nodemon because again, nodemon is for development, and Heroku will run this one, the start script with Node. Heroku will have Node, so that I just keep separate from the start. I like to do that. Yes.
Really quick, can you put dev dependencies in a git ignore? Or is that just naturally not show up?
That's so node modules by default, like this node modules folder by default is ignore. I think we have a git ignore here. Oh, we don't. So we're gonna need a git ignore instead. Oops. Oh, okay. Since let's have a git ignore, even though let's have a git ignore, that git ignore, and in this file we put all the names of stuff we don't want to be tracked by Git, so node modules. And I know that I'm probably gonna have this one, so I'm gonna add it here, store, the DS store. Yeah. You mean nodemon is not here, but it's here? Yeah. Okay. You could do npm remove nodemon, and then npm install -d, capital D, to install it as a dependency. Right. That's correct. You did the regular install. Yeah, I think the short is npm i-d, where I is for install, but the D is to add it as capital D. Yeah. Cool. So we have that, and let's run the app. Let's see what we have. npm run start dev. Cool. Our app is running with nodemon. Oh, going back to your question, Douglas. Since we are ignoring the node modules, our nodemon is inside of the node module, so it won't be pushed to GitHub. So we don't have to sort of ignore nodemon explicitly because we're already ignoring node modules. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Yes.
You might immediately throw an error saying you can't find Express.
Did you do npm install first? So when we just created the Express app, we need to do npm install. This will install cookie parser, debug, Express, and Morgan. Then after that, we install separately nodemon. Mm-hmm. Sure. Cool. pm run dev. We have our app running. Let's see if we got it working. So for this, we're going to be using Postman a lot. So you may as well fire up. By default, an Express server will run in port 3000. We saw that that is a problem once we have React, because React also tries to run the React app in the same port. So we're going to change it in a bit. I just want to make sure that it works. So when I go in the browser to localhost 3000, our app is working there. We also see this, which is a GET request that arrived to the root endpoint to just the slash, was replied with a 200, and that seems to have made another request for some CSS file. This we can leave as that, but I just wanted to see that my app was working. Now, if we go here to app, we see that app has some stuff already set up. It has two routers, index router and user router. This index router is what is showing me this here. It's showing me this welcome to Express message. We could get rid of that. I'm going to leave it for now. This user router is saying anything that comes to /users, sort of send it to be processed by the user router. If we look at the user router, it's a very simple endpoint. With just when a request arrives to /user, it's going to respond with the resource. So if we go localhost 3000 /users, we get this message: respond with resource. If we try to go to any other route, we cannot get / cannot get anything that we haven't set up, and so on. Cool. So, any questions about this? About some of the basic setup? Owen and then Peter.
I'm getting like a different error message. I'm getting not found for not found or not found. So can I get that?
Did you do the -- no view? If
I tried to do that and it said not found. So I'm still right.
let me see. If you're getting a 404, that's fine. And that's just because the no view helps you with that. Show me the browser. Yeah, this one. This is the same thing that I get. It's just that yours is clear only because you have it. So Peter.
I'm saying that I can't find cookie parser, but I'm looking at it.
And did you start? Is that started? Try to define and install the main role. Yeah, so you may get this error, or if you install the views, it's going to be a prettier error saying cannot find whatever 404. The point is that here there is nothing. There is nothing to reply with. Cool. So if we look at this file, there is, we're importing the cookie parser. This one is already there for us. We actually never have to touch that one manually. Morgan, this thing called logger, this is what let us do when we see the terminal where the backend is running. This is what is putting these console logs. These are console logs being made by logger. Again, that's a nice thing to have, so that you are able to tell which requests are being made and see what endpoints they're being made to. Routers, you're familiar with those. Here we set up the logger. Then this one is the Express JSON body parser, URL encoded body parser, cookie parser, the static, and then lastly here we have slash for the user router and users for the slash for the index router and slash users the user router. Any additional questions on the basic setup? Joanne? Okay. What does it say? Okay. So from here, we're gonna have a database that I'm just gonna take from here. I think in the lecture notes we have this repo that has example using pgpromise. This is sort of what we're gonna be building, and from here I'm gonna take db. I'm gonna take this seed file. I can share this on Slack. Let's see. Do we have? Let's do it, I guess, here. This is SQL for creating a simple table. So I'm gonna copy this. Open here to the side. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna create a DB folder. And inside of this DB folder, I'm gonna have a SQL file. I'm gonna call it seed.sql. And paste that there. This is a simple database that has just a table for users. We're gonna keep that an ID, a username, and something called password digest. That password digest will be the hash password, basically. And that should be it. So, okay. So I'm gonna kill the server because now I need to create this database. Now here we go back to one of these words, the schema, the database schema, basically. And Jonathan said the schema is like a blueprint, and that's correct. This here, when we have this file, our seed file that is describing our database, that is a database schema. Where we describe our database, how many tables are they going to have, what are the columns of those tables, any constraints on those tables. That, as a whole, that's known as your database schema. When you add a new table or when you change a column, you could also say, I have to update my database schema. So this file as a whole, you could call your database schema. If this file is like doing inserts or updating immediately after you created the tables, you'll say, the database schema now becomes only your create statements and your columns and your constraints on those. The inserts and the updates that you may write after, those will not be part of your database schema. Mm-hmm. And going back to that this is your blueprint for your database. With this blueprint, I get a copy. If I execute it, you get a copy if you execute it. Right? Cool. So I shared that on the online resources. We don't have a code share channel here. Maybe we should later on. So I took that from the example that is there. dbc.sql. The name of this file doesn't really matter. You can name it anything you want. It's just a SQL file. It's just sort of the same. The same goes for JavaScript files. Doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it makes sense to you. Okay. Any questions up until this point? How do we execute this SQL file? Peter? PSQL -f c.sql. I'm not in the folder, so I'm gonna get this error. Cannot connect to server. Oh, that's also because I don't have Postgres running. You should have Postgres running. I killed it yesterday because I needed to save battery. So if you have the elephant here, your Postgres is running. Oh, I learned a shortcut for zooming in and zooming out, but I forgot. Oh, anyway. Cool. So my server is running PSQL-F, and then the location of the file basically. So I know that my file is in the DB folder, C SQL. Let's run that. And then it seems that everything went fine. We don't see any errors. Were you able to execute the SQL file? Okay. So now that, if we go here on Postgres, that gives us a small database. Users list. This is the database we're going to be using. But this could very well be, the database that you created for your apps recently, where you keep your users. Cool. So we're going to have that. Now let's start writing some queries. So what we want here is, I'm going to use this user router so that when somebody goes to /users, we get all the users that are in our database. And we're going to also have an endpoint to add a new user to the database. So the way that I like to do it is, there are multiple ways. I like to have a queries file here, actually folder, queries folder, and in that folder I create a file, let's say users.js, and in this file we're going to put all the user related queries. So let's start with const get all users. This is going to be a function that is going to get our users from the database. I mean, that's correct. We need to use Pt1 to talk to the Postgres database. Pt1 is sort of the interface between JavaScript world and SQL world. Is what let us get information from a Postgres database and add information to it. So as someone suggested, let's install Pt1. So let's do npm install, just I for short, pg-promise. While that is installing, let's import it here. Remember that this is important to remember. We have, when we're importing code in Node, we use require to import code and module.exports to export it. Where we're in React, we do import blah from this file, and to export we do export default less. That import and export syntax that is used in React is a newer version of React. React is always running on the latest version of JavaScript. That's still not available in Node. So let's do const. Okay. So we will import db, right? Um, here, db require, and we're gonna have in the db folders, we're gonna have a file db. Actually, we should do that one first. So let's set up the PG promise first. So outside of queries, but still in DB, I'm going to create a folder called db.js. And here we do const pgp equal require pg promise. I think I can do this. Then we do const connection string, just cn for now, for short. And this here has to be our database URL. Basically, where is our database? Our database is always running in Postgres, //localhost. Anyone remembers the port? 5422? 5432. Okay, and slash the name of our database. What is our database called? Not seed. User list. That name doesn't matter. This name doesn't matter. This one matters. When you say create database, blah. User, is it plural or singular? Plural. User list. Cool. And then we do const db equal pgp, and we pass in the connection string, and we do module exports db. Okay. If we did this correctly, then we will be able to use methods like db.1, db.any to get information from the database, as well as insert information to the database. So let's try that out in here in users. First thing that I did was import that actual db file. Do it again, /db.js. This is the db that we are exporting from db.js. Now here we're going to do our actual database query. How do we do a database query with the DB object from pgpromise? .1.any. Let's go to the pgpromise docs. So remember that the pgpromise author liked one of our videos. So we now have a personal relationship. So here, methods. From here we got none, one, many, or any. We're gonna do like any. This leads you to the documentation. It says that any is a method that expects a query and some values, and is gonna return to you a promise that eventually will turn into an array. The query, which is the first argument, has to be a string or a function or an object. So far, we have just done it with strings, and I don't think we're going to get to functions or objects just because strings are enough for us. So in here, let's write a query. So let's do, we could write it directly there. Let's do that for now. db.any select star from users, and say. So we have our query here. We're calling db the any method in the db object. Now, would this be enough? What do we need to do here? Join. We need a try and catch. Who can articulate why we need that? Ganesh? It's a promise. db.any returns to you a promise. What do we know about promises? Takes time, and we don't know if it's going to succeed or fail, and we don't know how long it's going to take. Right? Again, this is one of those examples where in JavaScript you're going to find functions that return promises, and the majority of those functions that return to you a promise is because they're sort of, you can think of them as living JavaScript land, going to SQL land, and they don't know if they're going to come back, right? And that's true for Axios, for instance, as well. When you make an error request with Axios, Axios gives you a promise saying, I'm going to go check the server, see if it has what you need. I don't know if I'm going to come back with your results. So anything that's sort of going outside of JavaScript uses promises or callbacks. Those are the two ways in which we handle asynchronous code. All that is known as asynchronous code. So this returns to you a promise, which then tells us that we can do two approaches here. I don't know if you remember that then and that catch, where we could specify a callback here, the result. We could do console.log result, and if there is an error, console.log error. Let's try this one, just so that you don't forget that this is still a valid way of handling promises. What am I missing? There's an extra parenthesis here. And let's try this out. What I'm going to do here, sort of outside of my server is not running. I want to test this function, so I'm just going to call it here, get all users. And I'm going to execute this file just with Node to see if it works. So let's do cd into db / queries. And here I'm going to do node users.js to execute that file, and that file is just importing db and then calling my get all user functions, and let's see what we get. Okay, so we got an array, an empty array, and a good thing is that it didn't break, it didn't throw an error. This is saying, well, I'm doing all the job, but there is no users to return to you. Let's insert one user just so that we have it. Let's do that in here. PSQL-D to connect to the database and the user list. So I'm connected to the database, and I can say insert. You know what database you're connected to because this won't tell you. Insert into users for now. Username and password digest. Those are the two columns we'll specify, and the values for now, these are dummy values. I'm gonna say Alejo and 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I have an error. Values is plural. Spelling mistakes. Got another error. Password digest. Digest is misspelled. 2 errors in one line, both spelling mistakes. Not inserted. Digest is not double G. My head is still sort of in the way. Okay, so let's create the database. Remember, you could do this. I'm doing it with PSQL. If you have PSQL or PostSQL there, you can also do that there. And I'm gonna run my users.js file again. Node user.js just to try it out. And we see that now we get that user on array with one user with ID 1, my username, and my dummy password digest. That is not a digest at all. Yes, Janesh? A little bit louder. Why doesn't it disconnect? Like, it's still running there? Yeah, that's just because since this is asynchronous code, notice checking if there is any other asynchronous code that might be running. It's gonna wait a little bit, just in case something else might be running. So that's why it takes a little bit to sort of exit. Yes, Owen. Yes, I also shared it in the announcement channel. No, online resources channel on Pursuit 6462. This is it. With \q. When you're in PSQL, you can exit with \q. What does it say? Oh, did you do this one here? Do you have this exactly the same? Yeah. Yeah, I inserted it just by running PSQL, since this gives me, if you run PSQL, by default it's going to connect to a database with your name. You can connect to any other database with \c. And then here I just run insert this, which is SQL. I just wanted to test it out to put a user there, see if I could retrieve it back. You can do PSQL \c user list, or if you want to connect, if you know what database you're connecting to, you could also do PSQL-D, D for database, user list. This connects automatically to that database. This insert, this is just regular SQL. This you can run in here, or you can run in pSQL if you have installed pSQL or Postico, any other Postgres client. You know, like how we talk about the backend and the front end, and the front end is React, and the backend is our backend and the database. That's again or we talk about client and server. That is throughout most of software. Postgres, PSQL, Postico, and pSQL, you can think of those as front ends for your Postgres database. Those are known as clients to your Postgres database. And your Postgres database is the actual sort of server that keeps the databases. And these are front ends for that. Cool. Have a seed file. Actually, you know what? Let's do this live share so that you can actually have the code. Sign in with GitHub. So you can have the code at all times. Share, make read only. The link. I'm going to share it here on class chat. So you can click there and you can access all my code so that you are able to switch around, inspect the files a little bit more deeply. Okay. So again, here in db.js, inside of the database folder, we just set up the PG promise saying this is where my database is. PG promise will give you what is known as an interface with methods like db.any that let you interact with that database. This is also known as an API. The API of PG promise is this method, any one, none, etc. And here we were talking about this returns to you a promise. Did that any of the database methods return to you a promise, and you don't know how long that's going to take, you don't know if it's going to succeed, but you sort of want to be notified when it resolves successfully, right? We say that a promise can be in one of three states: pending, fulfill, or rejected. When we first create a promise, it's pending. Once it actually succeeded successfully, then is fulfilled, and once it fails, is rejected. This is a way in which we can handle the promise with that then and that catch. We have this console log and so on. But now, with more recent versions of JavaScript, we could use async await with try catch, which makes our code read a little bit better. So I'm going to move to that. Oh, let's say, actually, before we do that, let's make it fail to see the error. So I'm going to try to start from users from a database from a table that doesn't exist, like users ball. And let's run our file again, and we get this. We get our error once I try to run, and it says error relation users ball does not exist. Remember that relation, another word for table. Right, that is this catch here, and the promise being rejected. So async await with try catch give us the same result, basically. So to do that in that fashion, we're going to do async here. We'll put await before. I'm going to remove the then and the catch. I'm going to wrap all this in a try. Oh, this is weird. Let me just check my settings here. Tab. Oh yeah. We'll do a catch. I'm just trying to see. This is when I press tab, it's actually inserting a tab character, but I don't like that. I like two spaces instead of a tab, so I'm trying to fix that, but I guess it's not a big deal. Also, you see these arrows? They are not code. They are just when I insert a tab, I enable that to show up because I was doing something that we needed to see that. So that, never mind, let me just remove that. View. Render-wise, render. There. Okay, let's do here. When there's an error, let's do console.log. Oops, just error. Cool. Any questions about that? Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. So here, the result now that we're doing await, we're gonna get here. So I'm gonna do the const users equal await that. And then let's do console.log users. So let's see if we run this again. Change the table, but I want to see it break first. See if it breaks with the same error. Cool, we still get the same error. Relation user ball does not exist. That's because that table does not exist in our database. Let's fix that here. Users. We run that again, and we get our data again. So one more time, those are the two ways in which we handle promises in JavaScript. That catch attached to the promise, or async await wrapped in a try catch. Now, this is a pattern that I saw on your React projects. Is some of you will have this function, get all users, and you set up this function as your route handler or your route middleware, passing in here like rec, res, and next, and then saying, you know, res that JSON, maybe something like this, when you do payload, and you send the users here, and maybe a message saying retrieved all the users, something like that, maybe error false. However, this is not ideal, and this is not ideal just because this function then is in charge of two things when it should be in charge of just one thing. This function, the two things that this function is in charge of right now is going to the database, getting the data, and sending the response, replying, processing the request, and replying with the response. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have this function as pure as possible, where its only job is going to just get information from the database. And we're just going to call this function later on a route handler to get us that information and then send a response. So we're going to get back to this. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to have my function not send the response yet. Instead, just return the users. Just like that. And then here, I'm just going to export this module that exports. I'm going to export an object. I'm exporting an object because we're going to have a few user queries here. You're going to have add new user, maybe get user by username, and so on. So, and then here, let's do get all users, get all users. Cool, so we export that. Yes?
Is this one of those things where you could just write get all users?
Great question. I was expecting for somebody to notice that. Yes, you could do just this. Yes? That's a good question. We could, yeah, for now we're just gonna leave it like that. Yeah. We could return maybe false or null. I'm gonna leave it just like that. Okay, so we got this function. It's a function that does one thing and is properly named for what it does. Now we're gonna go on app, let's say, and then we have our users router, right? Let me close this here. DB is, we're not gonna touch DB anymore. And here in the routes, we have the index, which is the main sort of welcome message and users. Here, I'm just gonna remove these res.send. Also gonna turn, let's change those vars to const. And here, this function to ES6. So we do that. it's fine if you leave it as ES5 as well. So here's where we set up our router with our routes, right? And we say what endpoints we want to handle and what kind of request we want to handle. Is a post, a get, a delete, an update, or a patch, sorry, etc. And this function, just a refresher, we'd say router, then the method, the HTTP method we want to listen for, the endpoint at which we want to listen for. And remember that all these endpoints in the user routers are already prepended by /user. So if we look at here, let's put app on the side. This is all the routes, all the requests that arrive to /users are going to go to the user's router, we can think of. So when we do in users, when we do just slash, this is, if we think of the full URL, would be /users. Right? So in here then, let's import our query and use that here. Oh, even before that, so that's the endpoint. Now this second argument to the get is always a callback function. It's always a function that receives the request, the response, and next. And then this function can send the response, can process the request and send a response properly. Right? That's what we were doing with res.send. Now what we're going to do is send the response with the actual data. So let's do this. So we want to invoke our function. So let's import our query here. So let's do const user queries equal require. What folder I forgot? Let's do slash. No, so then two dot slash. Yes, in DB slash queries slash users. That is where we define our function, where we define our query. Right? This is the user queries file that I just call users.js inside of the queries folder. Now here then we can say something like user queries.get all users and invoke it like that. We can invoke our function just like this, but we need to add something else. What is that? Can we just do this? Let users equal that, and then maybe say res.json. Since we know that this function is going to get us users, right? It's going to get us an array of users, and we can do something like this. Payload users message retrieved all users, error false. This is standard that I like to follow for all the response objects. You can develop your own, or you can send straight the users. I like all my responses to have these three keys. I found them useful. You may as well find them useful. A payload that contains the actual data, a message that shortly describes what was retrieved or what happened, and an error true or false indicating whether there was an error or not. So let's try this out. Maybe this will work. So I'm going to open Postman now because oh, that's a good point. We never changed the server to 3001. But let's do that just before we try it out. Where do we change the port of our backend server? What file, Joy? In the bin what? In our folders, we have a bin folder that stands for binary, or for the what is executed, and we have a www file here. This is our entry point for our app, and here, let me close this here to the side. I will scroll down. We see a port being used here. Let's try it to 3100 or whatever you want that is just different from the Express, from the React port, so that we don't have trouble with that in the future or tomorrow, basically. Cool. That's it. Just close that. Any additional questions before we run the server and try out our first route with Postman? I mean,
shouldn't be async await from this function?
that's a good point. Yes, it has to be an async await because, or what do you think it has to be async await?
Because it's calling the function which is async await.
That's correct. This function, our callback function, has to be async await as well because it's calling this function. It's calling this function. And this function is async await as well. Or in other words, this function, user queries that get all users, is an asynchronous function. An asynchronous function will return to you a promise. You have to await that promise. Just before we do the async and await here, let's see what we get once we have this. So let's run the server, npm run start :dev. And then in Postman here, I'm going to do maybe this one. Oh, let me remove this and say http :// localhost 3100/users. Now let me hit send, see what we get, and we get this. So one good thing is we got 200, we got our response object, but we don't have a payload. Our payload is empty. This to sort of bring the point that Amin was making, this is an asynchronous function. Returns to you a promise, you don't know how long that's going to take. In fact, the response was sent. This function was executed, and the response was sent. But at the time the response was sent, the database query hadn't finished, and we got an empty object. Because it happened so fast. That's why we need to async here, await here. And I'm gonna do so. This is let's see if this makes the fix. Async wait. Let's try to execute this. Cool. Now we got our user there. And if we had more, we'll get more. Questions about the route handler code. Now, note here again how this is the function that is actually processing the request and sending the response, not the user queries get all users. The user queries get all user functions job is just to get the users from the database. And this function uses that one to get the users and send the response. Questions, observations about this code here? So should I include try and catch here, or is not necessary? Say that again. We should do it. It works. It works well. What happens if there's an error? Let's try it out and see if we get an error. So I'm gonna mess up my table name here, saying user one. It's a table that doesn't exist. Let's see what happens. Go to Postman, try to make the same request, and we get this. Retrieved all users, error false, no payload, and an error in the terminal that says relation users 1 does not exist. So maybe we should do something about this, because our server shouldn't be replying with retrieved all users when it actually didn't, right? Okay, so let's then try catch here. Try this. If that fails, catch it here. When you fail, make sure to send an appropriate error. Oh, so here we have a few options. Let's do this first. Let's do status. Something went wrong, so let's do 500. Status 500 for. I think I have seen server error codes 20. I think I had seen a meme about this. Oh yeah, this one. So 500 is saying server screwed up, or the developer that created the server screwed up. So 500 means server error. So let's do status JSON, and then let's say payload. There is no payload, so we could skip it, but I'm gonna set it to null. Message. And say fail retrieving all users. And error, let's set this one to true now. Yes.
If you put res and then like save the line as dot size and dot JSON and pick them all up.
That's correct. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It does. If I could have it like this, but if it's in separate lines, it's also gonna pick it up correctly. Yeah, I don't have any preference over it. Any other questions? Yes. Oh.
My thing stopped working after I changed it from 4.3000 to 4000, which changed it to, now I can't get to work. It says, options parameter, so it looks like we're using Postgres, so.
Let me take a quick look at that.
Set it back to 300. And then fill the server instance. That's what it should do.
So make sure that in Postman you are using 3.1 as the port to test it. Okay, so let's see here. So let's see if now we actually get an appropriate error. So I'm going to send this request again with my table with a spelling mistake. That should make it break. Hit. Oh, we still got the same. Wait, did I save? Wait. Yes.
It's because we didn't pass the error from the queries to
The, this one here?
yeah. We need to return it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think that might be it. So far we're just console logging. We're console logging the error here when it happens, which is this console log we get. This is my error, and then this object is the error saying that relation doesn't exist. I thought that error will sort of bubble and go to the next catch, but maybe I'm making an assumption, an incorrect assumption. Try one more again. Yeah. So I guess this is good. Once the error is catch on an inner sort of catch here, we have this catch, which is catching errors from here, from db.any, right? Once the error is catch, it doesn't sort of bubble to the next catch here. So we never see this one here, right? We never catch it here because it was already caught earlier here in our function. So what we could do is, I think I've done this in the past where I just rethrow it for another query to catch. I recently discovered a better option, which is just include one try catch instead of two. But let's look at this one first. I'm going to console log the error here and just rethrow the error. Now throwing the error here will cause this catch to run, and we should get our error message. So we go here, send this again, and we get payload null, failed retrieving all users, error true, and status 500. So we could do this. However, I discovered that there is some repetition of code in the try and catch. What we could do here is just include sort of the outer try catch, which is this one, and get rid of this one. So that instead of catching the error and just rethrowing, we could just get rid of this here. When in doubt, just catch the error, right? If this doesn't make sense, just catch the error and throw it again. Here, I have async await, and I don't have any try catch. But if this throws, if the get all user function throws, we're going to catch it here, because here we're calling that function. User queries, get all users, and we're going to try that. If that throws, we catch it here. And yeah, there are times, I think we're going to see one today, there are times where you want to like catch the error in the database query function and return something custom, or in this case where we catch it in the route handler. I think we're going to get to see that once we get a user by username. Cool. I don't know why this is not. Say that again? You can have as many as you want, but it's just, if you're careful, you're going to realize that not all of them are necessary. So if we have this exactly like that, remove the try catch in the inner function, that's going to be caught here. If we go again, we get all the users, still get that. Our function, this function is throwing. In fact, I think, let's see if we can see it here. Oh yeah, we can't see it here. This function is throwing, and we get it here in this catch, because here we're saying try this. This try literally means try. Try this, and this can fail. If it fails, let's catch that. It's just like, I don't know, actually, I don't know a real world analogy. But anyway, so, yes.
So why get rid of the throw?
I got rid of the throw because it was just rethrowing an error that I could have caught here with just one catch. So I got rid of the throw just because I was repeating the try catch, and I didn't need to rethrow the error if the error was already being thrown. I just could catch it in somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Again, when in doubt, just catch the error and rethrow it. Say that again? Mm-hmm. Say that again, a little bit louder.
So it's like it automatically throwing the error.
Yes.
That's the result of it being a promise function.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Whenever you have a function that returns a promise, and by default, all async functions return a promise that then you need to await on. When the promise is rejected, the promise, the function will throw. Yes. So that's sort of a feature, I guess, of promises. Yes.
I thought it's best to try for every async thing. So
Yes, that was initial advice that I gave you all. Always have, with all async await, have a try catch. Now, as we grow and as we learn, we start to see. Well, I'll say we start to learn better, right? And if we are aware of what's going on, then we can, bend the rules, if you will, a little bit, right? But the key part is, knowing, being aware of how it's actually happening. Again, when in doubt, always try catch with async await. Okay, so we got the error, meaning this is being caught here. And let's fix their query with just users. Let's send it, and we get back our users. So our query is working perfectly. Any questions before we move from here about getting the users, the code that gets the user, and throws the error? Yes. Oh, that's a good observation. Yes, in here, what Giselle is talking about is we have these users.js inside of DB queries, and here I'm exporting get all users as an object. So it's just suggesting, if I'm understanding correctly, is if we could destructure here like this, get all users, right? And then just call it here, get all users. Is that correct? The answer is yes, we can do this. We can destructure because we're exporting this object, and we now know that the destructuring allows us to just select specific keys or properties of any object. So yes, we could do this. However, for these cases, that is not React. I prefer having these user queries. Just because this gives me a little bit more context about where this function is coming from. I'll say this structuring is cool for short, concise code that you know where everything is coming from, or in React, like state, sort of such an ingrained concept that you know that it's always going to come from this dot state. So you use this structure, username from the state. So yeah, I prefer this structuring for those sort of more concise, where for instance everything is in one file, right? The state is in the same file. You're just structuring that same file. When it's code that is coming from others, from other files, I generally like to keep it with the name of the object to bring a little bit more context about where that is coming from. Yeah. But you can go with whatever you feel more inclined to in that scenario. Cool. So just one more time, we have a function here that makes a database query, selecting all the users, then it returns those users, and that's all it does. We can test this function by itself if we just call it, and we're gonna see the users. Now, this function is just sort of a helper for our route handler that is here. Remember that all these routes with /users. All these routes are already starting with /users because in app.js, if we look at, we're saying this is the users router, right? Routes user.js. We're saying for anything that arrives to /users, handle it with the user router. The user router is this file that we have here. So all the routes that we're going to specify here are already prepended with /users, and we don't need to say /users again here, because then that will become /users/users, just like that. These functions, I like to call them the route handlers. It's a function that literally handles the route, processing the request, and sending a response. This function is an asynchronous function that is calling our function from the user queries to get all the users. It then awaits for a result there and sends a response upon successful retrieval of the users, and sends an error in case it fails or goes wrong. Okay. Cool. And here, sort of again, here we sort of separated the logic that handles the request by having it in this function, and the logic that retrieves the information from the database being this function, get all users. And we have a little bit more cleaner code. We can test this in isolation, for instance, etc. Cool. Okay, so let's see, we got this working correctly. Okay, cool. Any questions before we move on to like adding a new user? Okay, so I'm actually gonna give you some time to add a route to your add a route to your user's router like this route. It's gonna be a post, and you're gonna say /new, and you're gonna hit here request response next, and so you're gonna need to do this, set up route to add a new user to the database. And make sure to add a new query to db/queries/users.js, something like, create new user or add new user. Let's call it add. So you're going to need to do two things. One is have a function, add a function here. So you're going to write this function, const add new user. Add new user. So write a function here. This function will insert a new user to your database. And for now, so the this function, the only responsibility of this function is to receive here a user. This user will have a username and password, right? And you're just gonna insert it to the database with one of the db dot whatever method. So have this function insert a user to the database. The user is gonna look like this. If we have a user object, it will look like this. Username, say like ho, password 1, 2, 3. Something like this. This function will receive a user like that, and it should insert it to the database. Now this user will come in the request body, right? In the request body, with Postman, we're going to send two fields. We're going to send password, username and password. That is going to, again, come in the request body. From there, from the request body, you get the user, and then you just send it to this function. This function actually inserts the user into the database, and then if the insertion went well, just return, new user added. Otherwise, say error when adding new user. So, questions about the exercise we're going to do? Okay, I'll be rotating around for any help. Yeah, from now it's going to be using that. So yes, you have to write it. Yeah. So if you remember, you're missing things either insert into whatever you want in the columns, and then values in parentheses the actual object, right? Okay, yes. So here, yes, so we're going to use the same, technically the same thing, but then instead of dollar sign one, we're going to say dollar sign slash or square brackets. All those work. User, user dash, um, dash user.
So I'm trying to remember how passing information.
Right.
That's where I got it.
So the way you do that,
Not just a bot.
it's a request. So the information will come from your breakdown file. So you have to make sure you send it.
Oh, so I can, so this is set up right.
Right.
This is got also backed up on.
Or you can just do so since this has just a user object to this, so just has remove those arguments and then just has a user. Before we do that, just create a new variable.
Before the trial.
Yeah, it doesn't remember, but yeah, it's really the same song. Now this is direct that body that way. So instead of barcoding it to the image layer, just make sure that it's direct that body that.
I'm just trying to decide where to put the.
That's correct.
Well, it's not letting me find work. Yeah, it's
That's correct. And then now in post-processing, you have to make sure that you send a request to the body. Make sure that it's URL included.
I'm curious, because you don't have body on the query section, where do you use
So you can do it the way that you're doing it. It's just a little bit, more organized, a little bit suggested. Whereas here you have an object that's going to be used, right? Assume this user is password and user.
Wait, so I'm returning the new user here, right?
Yeah, that's
Oh, do I need that? Oh. Okay, so
that just user.
I can do the one. Does it have to be capitalized or is it?
It doesn't have to be, but I like to capitalize it.
Why do you like this?
Do you have a URL? Okay, so you basically get parameters. Not even that. Just slash new. What that means is you get an error. It's breaking when we do not constantly. Oh, wait, you call it close. Maybe it's not just close. But you have, oh, no, this is the other problem. All of these this was should return something. Right. We're not sure about this because since a couple of you did this about returning the new user. This new user here, well, this is actually just a string with SQL. But you actually want to return the user. That's correct. Oh, here also you can send a response. In fact, user will work if you send a response right there. Rest digest. Success. Success.
Okay, so let's do that here. We said anything that comes to, oh, I guess first of all, let's write this function, the add new user function. Let's do, this is, since we know that this is going to deal with database, that's going to be asynchronous. We want to do async here. Now we're going to do the insert query. So let's do something like db here. Let's db that non insert into users, and then the columns that we want to insert to, which is username, password underscore digest. Let's see. This is going to be a long query. So when I have long queries, I like to put them on a separate variable. So I'm going to call it here. I'll call this maybe new user query. And I also like to format, this is personal preference, doesn't really matter. I like to format my query in multiple lines if it's too long. So I'll do something like this. Insert into users and then values. And we're going to talk about what goes here. Then I just do leave it out, non-new user query. Something like this. Right? Just, in a separate variable, if you write it there, and it's also fine. But here there is, when we're inserting data, there are a few things we need to handle. What would I put in here in the parentheses for the values? What do I need to put in here? Peter? $1, $2. These are valid options. Why do I need to pass those there? A SQL injection. So one, we could say, well, we just hard code it here, right? Like that. But then we don't want to hard code it, because then every time we register in a user, it's just going to register the same user, right? And we want this query to work for more than one user. If we execute this is going to insert Alejo with that password digest. But that's not what we want, right? We want something more general. So what we could do is then what Peter suggested here, $1, $2. And then if we do this, how can we sort of plug in values here for this $1 and $2? How is it that we can plug in any username as $1 and any password as $2? I mean, great, very accurate language. So second argument, second parameter, you pass in an array, and this array now needs to have two things: whatever I want to put in here and whatever I want to put in here. So I could do something like, what I want to put in here is the username. So I could do in the first index, let's do user.username, username, and for the second one, user.password. Note here that in the database we have a column called password digest, and hopefully by the end this will make a little bit more sense. But here I'm just going to pass the password as the password digest. The password right here, as of right now, hopefully before we go to lunch, we actually get to encrypt the password. But right now we're going to store the password as plain text. That is not a good practice. Don't ever store a password in plain text. But we're going to do it like that, just so that we see it first and then we encrypt it. Cool. So this is definitely a valid option. Since this is asynchronous, what do I need to do? Await. So we can do await like that, and then we can do, maybe return true. Let's try this out first. Yeah, I'm just gonna return true for now. And we're gonna get to talk about the returning keyword in Postgres and how useful it is. Yes.
I guess you will have an error here because you're expecting.
This one.
Yeah.
So let's see if this works first. So I have a function that is able to insert a user, and is expecting a user with a username and a password. As long as I pass those, this should work. So let's do that here. /user/new is gonna be let's do try now here. Note here that same sort of pattern. I didn't add try catch here, so I'm gonna handle the error here. So do try catch. And here I'm gonna say, I don't know, maybe let user equal await add new, user queries that add new user, and here I need to pass in this user object, right? This user object is gonna come, well, that user object is gonna be our request.body, literally. Just for being more explicit, I'm gonna create it here. Let's do maybe here. I'm gonna call this new user, and then I'm gonna say here const user. Yeah, actually, even before I say that, here we could just do this. Rec.body, right? Passing the rec.body. As long as the rec.body has a username and a password, then we're fine. And I'm doing this just sort of for clarity. I'm going to define a variable here, user. Let's call it maybe user info. And this has a username that is going to be equal to rec.body.username. And this has a password that is going to be equal to rec.body.password. And then I'm going to pass in here, instead of rec.body directly, I'm just going to pass user info. Like that. Cool. Any questions so far? Yes.
Why doing that? Creating that user info variable if you are gonna,
This?
yeah,
Well, I'm saying that you don't have to as long as you get what's being passed here. So you can just pass rec.body here directly.
right that way.
Yeah. I'm just doing it for sort of extra clarity. Like this, and then we can do, well, if that went well, then let's do res.json and going with our format of payload. The payload will contain the new user for now, and I see that that new user could be better. It's going to have the payload, it's going to have a message. I hit this thing that blocks our view. Let's call it manage success. Adding a new user. Error. False. And let's do the same for the catch. Let me just lower this here. For the catch, it's just the same thing, but I'm going to set the status to 500. And instead of the payload being the new user, it's going to be null. And then failure. Error true. And on top of that, I like to, if our code breaks, we're just going to get this, being sent back. It's always good to console log the error here. To see it in see the error and see the stack trace to debug it. Make sure that whenever your app is not working, and you try it and you see nothing, basically not even a console log, what that is suggesting is your code is breaking indeed, but you're not console logging the error, you're not exposing the error, and then it's just very hard to debug an error without actually seeing what it is about. I also note here that I could send the error here like that. However, that error might contain information that I don't want to disclose to the user, right? Like the name of my files, for instance. So instead, I just do this where we sort of mark that there was an error, and the user just gets this error message. There was a failure. I'm not going to tell you exactly what went wrong, because that may a tech-savvy user or even a developer, a hacker, can use that against. us. So, okay, let's see if this works. Yes.
Isn't the payload going to be just true?
It's just going to be true, and we're going to see how can we actually get the user rather than just true. Yes, the payload is going to be true. Let's try this out. So remember, this is going to be /user/new. So I'm going to go Postman. Maybe save this and create a new one. I think I already had it here. Okay, let's just create a new one. Copy this URL. /user/new. It's going to be a post. The body has to be X form URL encoded or raw if you type in the JSON here. I prefer XWWW form URL encoded. I'm going to do password. I'm going to call this one Alejo 4473. Oh, sorry, not the password. The password is just going to be 1234 now. Username is going to be like 4473. All right. So we are about to send this information. Also, I think what I'd like to do here is console log reg.body just to double check that the information is there. So I'm going to console log this here. Body reg.body. Cool. Let's hit send. Let me open the terminal here. My app is crashing, so maybe I should look at that first. npm run start dev. Yeah, so let's look at this first. So say await is only valid in an async function. You probably have saw this error already, right? I hope you have. Where do I fix this? Brianna? Line 25. Here, mark that function as async. Let's see if that was the error. Cool, our app is working correctly. Thank you. Now, cool, so that's the first step. Check that your server is running even before you try it. And hit send. And we got this payload. We got payload true, success adding a user, false. Okay, this is a good message. Now here we have the body. The body, let me open this a little bit bigger. Reg.body that I'm console logging here contains literally the body that I sent with two keys, password and username. We got this Morgan console log here saying a post request arrived to /user/new. I replied with a 200. So this suggests that everything went well. How do we double check? Michael? Postgres, we could just go to the database. Do I have Postico or any of those? No. Oh yeah, I have Postico. Postico or pSQL, you could just do select star from users to check. Now, since we already set up a route that gets us all the users, then let's just use that. So let's go back to Postman. This request that hits send, and cool, we have a second user. Yeah, nice. Let's maybe try a few more. Hit send. Hit send. Let's get all the users. Cool, we got all our users there. Any questions, comments? Yes.
I'm just wondering, why would a payload come back as null when it creates the user?
So that's a good question. We're gonna address that like next, right now. So we have to remember now. You see here, and this goes back to a comment that also Sergio mentioned. Well, we get the payload true, but what if we actually want the user that was just inserted, right? With reply with something a little bit more meaningful. This is fine. We could do with this, but then we'll need to, maybe make another network request to get that specific user, maybe by ID or by username. But it'll be cool if when we register a user, we reply back with the newly inserted user, right? For that, then we need to change a few things in our query. Let's do queries users. These are our query, and then this is our add new user. Now, by default, an insert query doesn't return anything. We saw, when we were in the terminal, when we do this, I'm going to log in PSQL, it's the user list. This is just a demonstration, you don't have to do it. When we do select star from users, we get all the users, right? Now when we do insert, I think I have an insert here. I have to, when we do an insert, oops. You see, when I did a select, I got this table back, right? So you can think of it as the query returning to me this data. When I do an insert, I get nothing. I get just this thing that says insert 0 and 1. I don't get what I just inserted, even though it was inserted. If I do select star from users, the new user is there. Now, if I want to get something back from an insert, and this is Postgres specific, I think other databases don't have this. We can do returning star. Returning star means just return back to me everything that was inserted. Right? Now if I do this again, I have to change my name to Rockstar. If I do returning star now, you can think of returning star, and then I get back what was just inserted, which is really handy. You can think of the returning as, I don't know if this is true, but you can think of it as under the hood just making a select immediately after it inserted something, right? That get us back what was just inserted. Say that again? That's a good question that I don't have the answer to. Maybe the documentation on returning could offer more explanation. I think this will be more performant than having to do another query to get the user by ID. I'm guessing though, but cool. So the return keyword again is Postgres specific. I think on other databases, if you want to get the user that was just inserted, you have to make another query. Select star from users where the ID matches, or maybe sort it and then check which is the last row, etc. But this is cool. Well, let's use the returning keyword to reply back with the user that was just inserted. So what we're going to do there is, then here, I like to do it so like this, returning star. Just add that there. And we're going to need to change something else, but let's see it break first. I'm going to quit this. Go to Postman. Let's hit send. Let's change another username. Let's hit send. And we get failure adding a new user now. And let's see, if we look at the error, then it says query result error code, query result error not empty, no return data was expected, received 1 query, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we can actually see the query now with the actual values, and the 500. Any ideas why this is happening? Bunil?
Yeah, DB none.
Say that a little bit louder.
Yeah, DB none, which tells you not returning.
That's correct. Here, this part. DB none is a method in the database that expects no return no data back, right? Returns none data back. So this is sort of a measure on PG promise saying, well, if I was expecting nothing and I got something that's throw an error, that's fishy. But then what we could do here is just change it. We know that we expect always one result back from an insert of creating a new user. So let's change it from db.none to db.1. Now, since this is returning something, this is returning the newly added user, then we can save that to a variable like const new user equal await that. And instead of returning here true, back to 0 points are here, we do new user. The database is going to give us back the user thanks to the returning star. We save that user into the new user variable. We return that so that when we come here, so where is the other one? Let me close this one. Put this to the side here. So that here, when this new user, now we have the actual user. The actual user that was just inserted. This our query for add new user is going to return that new user, right? Then our user query returns that user. We call that with the same name, new user, and we pass it down here. Okay. Let's see what we got if we do send a request. Let's see if the server is running. It's running. Send the request, maybe another 007. Cool. And now we see that payload, instead of true, just has the actual user. Again, this is that returning keyword on the query that then returns the thing that was just added. We're return that here so that we can actually access it here and send it in the payload. Questions or comments regarding this, what we just added, or we just modified? Yes?
Can you scroll up on your, on the, exactly, I'm just trying to find out why I'm getting there.
What error are you getting? What's the same?
You just never successfully exposed.
Do you have this console log here?
I'm getting a,
You have this console log on the catch for the error?
two.
So you're seeing the error in the terminal?
It's saying that the null value passwords underscore digest violates the null as a string.
Okay.
The object it's trying to push up is username password, not password.
So could you repeat the line of the error one more time for everyone to hear?
Null value column password underscore digest violates not null constraint.
Muriel?
Do you still have password digest in there, right?
So note here. So your problem is that do you have insert into username and password digest, right?
I do.
And are you using $1 and $2?
I am.
Okay, and then here you're doing username, that username, and user that password, not password digest.
I am.
You're doing all that?
Yeah.
Okay, then in Postman here, in Postman you need to make sure that in here you're doing password and username, not password digest here.
I am. Maybe it's I'm doing username first.
The order shouldn't really matter.
Maybe he has a space on the.
Oh yeah, that's important. If you have a space here, like that, that breaks it all. So make sure that you don't have extra spaces there. Let's take a look. Show me That should be. So, yes. Any other additional questions? Yes.
I did a different way.
Okay. Does it work?
Yes.
Okay. That's first and foremost, the most important point. Continue.
I kept the DB.none.
Okay.
I was just returning the user that was input, the body that was input.
Oh, okay.
You just like this.
Right. That's fine. You just don't have the ID in here, right? If you needed the ID for something, then you will do it like my way. Now here, that can be a downside of your approach that you don't have the ID. But mine also has a downside, which is I'm revealing the user's password, right? Which we don't want to do at any point. This should not be here, right?
You can also do returning ID, comma, user.
That's correct. Yes, we could do, instead of returning star, we could actually just return ID and the username. Username. Now, if we do 008, the password, we're not revealing the password anymore.
What would be the advantage of none then? You can actually insert with one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer. Unless it's just when you want to insert and you don't really want anything back. But for the most part, it's like we want whatever was inserted, we want it immediately back returned to us. Most of the time I realized I ended up using the returning star because I want what was inserted right back. But yeah, in the case where you actually don't want anything back, you'll use db.none. Yeah. Let me know if anyone discovers something that you don't need it right back. I'll be interested in looking at that. Okay. A few things here is, yes, you can pass this as an array and then use $1 and $2. There are other formattings, like this is another option. You could do slashes or square brackets. You could even do curly brackets, but curly brackets has a problem, which is curly brackets are specially interpreted in a template literal, which is written with backticks. So I avoid them at all costs when I'm doing a query, and especially because it's really easy to introduce a SQL injection here, where by mistake I try to do this, username, and say, oh, I saved myself of this. Well, yes, you save yourself from this, but you become vulnerable to a SQL injection attack, where my username could be, select star from users, or select credit card from users, and then I'll get back all your users' credit card information if I put that as my username. So that's why I avoid curly brackets and $sign in SQL queries that I'm passing to Pt1 and that are written in backticks. So what I can do this backslash or just slash, and similar here, user that password. And how this changes the game is that instead of specifying that array here, I can just specify the object. And PG promise will look in this object, will look for a username key and a password key, and is gonna input their values in this place, basically. Go with whatever feels more comfortable. This one, I think this one is more explicit rather than $1, $2. This will actually, by reading just the query, I'm able to tell what is going to be plugged in. So I particularly prefer this method, which instead of passing an array here, I pass an object with those keys. Let's just check that this works. 9. Oh, it broke. Great. Username doesn't exist. Let's see. Username, user password. Anyone has seen this error before? No? I need help. Joy. No, the spelling, let's just look at the documentation. The documentation has some examples. I think I had it open. PG promise docs. Here, the README in the GitHub has some examples for that. This is known as, what I'm doing is known as query formatting. And then there are index variables, which is what we saw earlier, where you specify this. Specify $1, $2, and that's going to be looked up in this array. And then there are name parameters. That's what I like, where we can do this. Okay. We have this insert into users, first name, last name, age, values, and then you specify this. $name first, name last. Note that all of these are valid. Curly brackets, parentheses, angle brackets, square brackets, and slashes. You could use those to replace, and here's an example of that. They're using curly brackets for that, angle brackets for that, age, slashes for that. And then here we can see that the second argument is this object. So here we see that there is like name that first. This name is this key name, and that first is the first key of that object. So what the mistake that I have here is that I don't need to do this. User that. You just need to do that. These two keys, username and password, are going to be looked up in the user object. Right? And how long does it take to look something up in an object? Constant time of 1. So let's see if that fixes it. Send. Cool, we got back our user. Okay, this is looking good. Questions, comments, thoughts? So, what's left from here then, here we haven't seen, well, I hope we haven't seen anything surprising, like extremely surprising. We just insert it into a table. Now then from here is, I think let's just leave that for after lunch. But what we're gonna do next is actually hash the user password, so that even if the user password is 1, 2, 3, anyone who steals our database cannot figure that out by obfuscating them. The proper term is hashing the password. So let's do that after we come from lunch. Remember that there is the panel that you are invited to, and so class will resume. Let me look at the calendar. I think class will resume at 3. That's correct. Yeah, we resume at 3. Go to the panel, hear their advice, and so on, and then be back here at 3.
Take place in the flex space.
That's correct. It's going to be taking place in the flex space from 1 to 2. No, from 2 to 3. You should be in the panel if you're not doing anything else.